Hello, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to share our agenda in the chat just so everyone here has a good idea of what we're doing together as I navigate my screen. Here we go. All right, so here is our agenda for the day. We're going to start with the welcome and housekeeping, then go into a brief presentation on career competencies with the Career Center and myself from Education Abroad. Then we will go into the panel discussion and then an open conversation and a Q&A. And so you're encouraged to engage and interact in the chat with comments and questions throughout the panel discussion and throughout the presentation. And then definitely when we go into the Q&A, we encourage you, if you are comfortable, to unmute and ask questions, or you can also raise your little blue hand in the Zoom thing, and I will call on you if you would like. And please remain muted throughout the presentation. And we are going to record the first part of it. So we're going to record the presentation and the panel discussion, but we will stop recording during the Q&A. So that won't be recorded. So we can share this with others who cannot make it this evening. All right, and with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started.
Oh, Angela, you were talking on mute, so I didn't know if you were.
Oh, you're good to go. You're good to go.
All right, thank you, Angela. So I'm Jennifer Tarnowski. I work over in the Career Center. Normally, I'm the specialist for the College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences, but today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the NACE Career Readiness Competencies. So you've probably never heard of NACE before, but they're the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So this is a group where employers who are hiring students get together and talk with colleges and college career centers and let them know what are top skills that they notice are needed in the companies that they're hiring for. So there have been updates based on data that happen every so often, and these are the most recent competency areas that have been identified. And they range from technology, teamwork, equity, inclusion, critical thinking, communication, professionalism, to career and self-development and leadership. And we'll go into them in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. So please move forward. All right, we're going to start off kind of defining each of the competencies. Within the communication bucket, there's a lot of different skills that you can have. And communication is sort of defined as being able to effectively exchange information. This could be in a work environment, it could be in a volunteer experience, it could be anywhere where you have to professionally express your ideas to another individual. You should be able to clearly share your ideas and explain different perspectives and your reasonings for why you're taking a stand on something or saying that this is a recommendation. You should be able to reason and explain why, that in a way that others can clearly understand. Teamwork is very closely related to this. If you are a little deficient on your communication skills, sometimes maybe you aren't able to work as effectively in a team. It's more difficult to build and maintain collaborative relationships. So the teamwork competency encompasses a lot of different skill sets. It's the ability to achieve common goals and accept and understand diverse viewpoints when you are interacting with other individuals. And this kind of feeds right into equity and inclusion. If you're able to accept diverse viewpoints and you're being able to equitably engage people regardless of their background, and be sensitive to other cultures and challenge non-inclusive practices, you are building that competency area of equity and inclusion. This is phenomenal for all of you because if you're going into an education abroad experience, this is exactly the competency area that you're going to be building in your experience. And then that, of course, feeds over into professionalism. I'm kind of going in a circle with these because professionalism is defined in this category as being able to act ethically and with integrity. You're demonstrating dependability and accountability at work. You're demonstrating effective work habits. And generally, professionalism goes hand in hand with being able to communicate appropriately with people. So if you're being, equitable with others in the workplace, you're also probably being professional in your communication with them as well. We can go to the next slide. So these ones are a little bit more technically minded, at least the top two. Critical thinking is where you have to understand and identify and respond to others' needs or needs in the workplace. This is where it's really critical for you to understand situational context. You're taking in a lot of information and you're being able to dilute that down to just what is relevant in the moment. You're logically analyzing what is relevant to then make recommendations to an employer. And it's really about being able to process everything that's going on around you and come up with something that makes sense in a work environment. And technology is a little bit more fluid because this is a skill where things change fairly rapidly. It's an area where you're really more focusing on understanding and leveraging new methods of work because things change so quickly, and there's been a proliferation of different software types that you can use in your workplace, so many different toolkits. It's partly critical thinking to identify and learn which tools are the right ones for the job you're doing right now. And it's also combining that to achieve strategic goals. What's the goal of your organization? What's the goal of a particular project that you've been assigned to in your workplace? And knowing how can you use certain skills and tools to increase the efficiency of getting that work done. And technology, again, kind of ties into career and self-development because technology moves so rapidly. You have to constantly be proactive in engaging in continuous learning. Things change at a pace that we have never really seen before in human history. And if you aren't actively engaging in learning opportunities or navigating other career opportunities or building more relationships to network and know what is going on around you, you're probably not growing in a career sense. You might be stagnating. And so if you want to be growing in your role or potentially getting promoted later on down the line, you need to take your career and self-development in your own hands and always be looking out for new skills that you can develop. And then finally, that brings us to leadership. I always like to end on leadership because it sort of encompasses all of the other competency areas that we talked about, and it's really bringing others together to achieve organizational goals, developing yourself and others to realize their full potential, and then recognizing and utilizing all of those strengths together. So the next slide, we're going to talk about these competencies in action. I have a very diverse work history, and part of that work history included working in human resources for a while, where we were involved in recruiting. And so I like to bring everything back to job descriptions because that's kind of the meat of your future careers. You're going to have some job description at some point that you have to measure yourself up against and be prepared to be engaged in, like the tasks that are included in the job description. So this is a real one. This is a government and public policy internship that was posted. It might be closed by now, but as of 2 weeks ago, this was a live job description, and we kind of go through and we see all these different required skills that they're asking for. And it looks like a lot. It looks like there's just so many different things that they're looking for. But if we go to the next slide, you're going to see that there's a lot of key phrases here that are highlighted. written and oral communication, interpersonal skills, professional integrity and ethic, problem solving, graphic design, HTML. And so we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to look at how these all relate back to those competencies we just talked about. About 75% of that job description fell under these core competencies. So some of those key phrases that popped up for communication were written communication, oral communication, under teamwork, interpersonal skills, leadership skills. Under professionalism, again, those interpersonal skills fall under there. There were phrases and words that describe being confident, mature, staying calm under fire, acting with integrity, being adaptable, and handling multiple tasks. That's all under the bucket of professionalism. Likewise, you have over on the equity inclusion side, you're kind of seeing that there can be overlap between these competency areas. And in this case, we have interpersonal skills, again, being mature, because you never know what kind of situation you might be in it, where you have to act mature if somebody else may not be acting in an equitable or inclusive manner, and also being calm under fire and ethical. And then we'll just go through the last one before we start tying this back to your education abroad experience. So on this last page, we have the critical thinking skills. They talked about research, problem solving, and ability to prioritize. That is all in that same critical thinking bucket. For technology, in this case, in this particular job description, they were looking for graphic design experience and HTML. And we've kind of touched all of this already: leadership, interpersonal, professional ethics, that all goes there. And the more curious one in this case is they're not really asking for you to have career and self-development skills or that competency, but when they talk about having a strong business sense, that means you went out and developed that through experience. When they talk about the tech skills, graphic design and HTML, this could have been a public policy major that applied to this government internship, and you would need to learn things outside of your major to be really relevant for this role, which included those tech skills, graphic design, HTML. And then, of course, excellent communication skills. Those don't happen overnight. Those are things where you develop them over time through your personal self-development and getting out there and trying more things, including education abroad. And so on that note, I will pass it back over to Angela.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. And I love how it's, applying to even applying to grad school and applying to jobs, like those descriptions and those necessary all of the application processes can seem really overwhelming, but this is such a wonderful way of how it's, broken into these 8 competencies, and then and then going into each competency and then being able to highlight those descriptions and put it all together. It really helps make sense of it. So now we want to go into, how does education abroad support those career readiness and those career competencies? And I'm going to share just a couple slides on this really great 2017 study that the Institute of International Education completed, and they call it Gaining an Employment Edge. And they surveyed over 4,000 participants on how their education abroad experience either contributed or did not contribute to a job offer or career readiness, and so on and so forth. And there's a couple key points from that survey, from that research study, that I want to point out. The first is that many people who went abroad during undergrad or even during their graduate experience found that they were able to expand their career possibilities, and they left with a broader understanding of opportunities that were previously unknown or even unconsidered to them. And then they also had more confidence to explore those paths, and they were more ambitious in going down those different ways. There were also a couple long-term impacts from study abroad. So maybe their education abroad experience didn't relate exactly to getting that specific job, but then later on, they were able to articulate the skills that they developed through education abroad and through that their experience at that job position to gain a promotion, either to a managerial level or another. So those communication skills, interpersonal skills, and the ability to understand and work with difference were key in promotions later down the line. Another interesting finding was that STEM majors were able to really utilize their education abroad experience when applying to jobs. They found that their home coursework was more insular, and their education abroad really gave them that extra standout skills on like gaining soft skills, like those interpersonal skills and intercultural competencies that made them stand out in the job application and ultimately get their position. And then the last one is intentionality. So the students that had a career prospect as an idea while they were applying and choosing for study abroad programs, they were able to choose a more highly structured and more, funneled program for their goals that helped them build the specific skills they wanted to, and then they were able to utilize that in the job application process. So this slide shows the different competencies. This is the way that they broke down their competencies when they did their study, and into intrapersonal, cognitive, and interpersonal. And we can see that the majority of them had a significant amount going towards their education abroad experience, developing those skills, with the least amount being the technical and software skills. But again, if that's something that you're going into with an intentionality into your study abroad experience, and you could find a program that has that in a different country, which would be, phenomenal to be able to show in those applications. And then the final slide here also shows the belief that the study abroad experience contributed to their job offer by their academic focus. And it's interesting, while the majority of them are like 40% or higher, that it did contribute to that, others are not sure. And I think, again, I want to highlight how the longer term impact that study abroad might have on your experience when you get into the job and then go on. So maybe, for example, like fine arts, you start as a, I guess I don't know, but like a lower position, an entry-level position, you can utilize those skills that you learned to climb up the ladder and get into that managerial position. So really positive facts and findings from that study. And if you are interested, I can share the full document, because it's really, if you're nerdy like me, it's a great read. But now I want to begin our panel discussion and introduce our panelists this evening. So the first is Harrison Liang. He is currently a fourth-year student graduating with a bachelor's in political science and international affairs and economics in June. His time studying abroad in Japan inspired him to pursue a career working in a field related to international relations. And Harrison is currently studying Mandarin in Taiwan and looking forward to using his language skills in the field in the future. And then we have Zara Kezi, who recently graduated from UCR's School of Public Policy, studying international, social, and economic policy. She hopes to work for an international organization or nonprofit that helps mitigate border crises and the consequences that come with such conflicts. Zara will be spending the next year in South Korea on a Fulbright fellowship. And then Kate Fitzgerald graduated from UCR in 2017 with a bachelor's in history and studied at the University of St. Andrews for a semester in 2016. Her experience in Scotland during her undergrad inspired her to get her master's in history from the University of Edinburgh, and she spent 2 years in Scotland studying and doing research. Kate currently works for West Coast University in the Student Service Department and is looking forward to pushing students to study abroad once they are able to. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we will get started. So the first question for our panelists this evening is, what are 2 key skills you grew during your education abroad experience? And you can share stories if you'd like. Go for it.
Well, I would say for me, definitely one was active listening, because even though they speak English in Scotland, the accent is sometimes very difficult to understand, especially if they're from the west coast of Scotland. And in particular, I remember I had a professor who kept saying "butta" to us when we were talking about the Council of Buttas, and all the American students are like, "Is he saying butter? Like, what is this?" And then he was like, eventually we figured out he was saying boroughs, because that's how Scotland was distinguished at a certain period of time. You were distinguished by boroughs. And so just making sure that you're listening, using those active listening skills, context clues are definitely key. But that's applicable to everyday life, especially in the workplace, making sure that you're giving the person that you're speaking to their full attention that they deserve. And even if they're not exactly explaining maybe something in the most articulate or clear way, just making sure that you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is what they mean. Let me clarify, and then you can go from there. But I would say that's definitely a big skill that you need in real life and also in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I met a lot of also people who were from the UK or Australia, and sometimes like their accents or like just the language they use was completely different than what we're used to, and it was just a hard time to get used to their terms and phrases. But I also want to add on that education abroad helped me develop my interpersonal skills and be more open-minded and be more willing to listening to other people and what they're saying, which is something that I definitely was not able to do before I studied abroad. I think that studying abroad like made me do that because it was like a completely new environment, and I knew that people were all over the place, and it made me want to like understand where they're coming from and try to meet them like halfway or just like fully understand where they're coming from. And this translated to the workplace environment because it allows you to also be open-minded to different ideas that you never could have considered, and like work together as a team to build on that and progress further on projects or even just normal assignments.
I think the two key skills that really were developed because of education abroad, one was like when I was still, I guess both started when I was still here in America. One, especially being like planning, just knowing how to plan around, like I still had school, I still had work, but I had a lot of meetings that I had to go to for education abroad, and I had a lot of like doctor's appointments and medical clearances and things I had to gain. And then once I got to Korea, you only have a certain amount of time there, so I had about four months or so, and I wanted to utilize my time as best as I could. So I really wanted to plan well so that I could not only be taking classes there, but also travel and learn about the country and learn about the culture while I'm there and take advantage of that opportunity that I wouldn't be able to gain here. And another skill that kind of leads into that is that I tried to learn Korean before I left for Korea because, it's a language that I didn't know before. And I wanted to kind of go to a country that I didn't know the language of before so that I could force myself to and had like a really good incentive to learn the language. And it really opened up my opportunities when I was there. I think I was able to converse with a lot of community members about topics that I don't think I would have been able to if I didn't speak Korean to them. And I think it made them feel more comfortable with the fact that I was there because I look very different from them and I sound very different from them. And it made me feel more comfortable. And I think it made them feel like, okay, she tried, so like I'm going to try too.
That's wonderful. And I love how you shared, Zara, how it actually started like during your application process in the US too, and how you really learned time management and figuring out how to navigate all of the parts of the application process and then going over. And I love the different accents, even in English. I know like if I'm ever watching a UK or an Australian show, I have to put the subtitles on because just because I'll miss something. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So the next question is, what did these experiences and skills mean for your future? Did it change your goals or perspectives at all for what you wanted to do?
Yeah, for me, it definitely changed my career goals in the future. Before I studied abroad, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. Like I was leaning towards like somewhere in government, but I didn't know what to do, specifically within government. And then during my time studying abroad, I realized that I actually enjoyed talking to people from all over the world, and also just speaking a different language and interacting with people from different cultures. So it definitely shifted my career trajectory into being a like working in international relations in the future. So like maybe like for the State Department or defense or USAID in the future, because those jobs provide the opportunity to go abroad and work for the government, which was something that I wanted to do before, but education abroad narrowed the career paths for me into like these specific subsets.
I would say for me, it didn't really change my goals because I always knew I kind of wanted to stay in academia in some way, shape, or form, whether that be a teacher or an advisor or a counselor. But it definitely expanded the possibilities of potentially working and living abroad. Like I never would have considered doing a master's abroad unless I had done my first education abroad experience, and that was only for 6 months. And I did everything in my power to try to stay in the UK and try to get a job and live there for an extended period of time. But unfortunately, that just wasn't in the cards quite yet. But it's still definitely a goal for me to eventually work with students in an international environment, because it's incredibly rewarding. The stories that they have, the friendships that they make are just really, really special. And I just think that that would be a really rewarding way to spend my time in the professional world.
Yeah, I think study abroad was actually the reason why, kind of like my catalyst was a class that I took, and then study abroad was kind of like my trial period to think like, okay, is this really what I want to study? Is this really what I want to do in the future? And I think it's definitely true that I do want to like go back to Korea, not only as a not only for Fulbright, but also as like a student. And I hope to work in Korean politics one day, but I mean, I feel like that might be a little hard, so I don't know about that. But I do think studying border crises was not like on my mind before I took a class at UCR that kind of explained the different crises in the world and underdeveloped countries and things like that. Like that wasn't something I even had knowledge about before, and so that class really became the reason why I wanted to study in Korea. And I think just being able to learn Korean and being able to converse with people there and being able to go to school there was just an amazing opportunity, regardless of whether I ever go back or not. Like I'll always hold that to dear to myself. And like I said earlier, like time management and stuff like that. Like, oh my God, I was so terrible with that. I mean, I'm still not great with it, to be honest, but I mean, I really learned what a Google Calendar was, and how to manage my time better. But I think what I really, really learned was that I really love being a student and that I want to stay a student as long as possible. So it kind of pushed me more towards getting a PhD in the future, which I didn't think I would want to do because I don't know. I mean, public policy, that's not really a field in which PhDs exist. So I think I want to do like sociology. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't taken classes on North Korea and South Korea and learned about the politics there, because I think that kind of stuff just isn't really taught here as much. And to go into depth was a really amazing opportunity, but that was something I think I had to do in South Korea.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And while like all of you had a different experience, but it still did like make it a serious impact on your future, which is really awesome to hear about. How did you leverage these to transfer, you know, these skills and changes in experiences and ideas to transfer into interview responses and cover letters and resume bullet points and all of the fun stuff that goes into applying to graduate school and applying to jobs?
I think the main thing was that I was able to work at, so I went to Yonsei University and they have a hospital system there. So I was able to work at the hospital, I guess like volunteer, it wasn't working, but I was able to volunteer at the hospital system there as a English teacher in the pediatric cancer center. And it was just like a really laid back opportunity to kind of talk to these kids. And honestly, it was mostly just talking in Korean because they were just like excitable little children. They didn't really want to learn English, but it was still an opportunity to kind of be someone who looked really different. I think I was the only non-Korean in the entire hospital, and it's a very big hospital, like UCLA style. So it was pretty weird, but because I'm from Southern California, so I don't really get to experience where I'm like the person who looks completely different from everyone else. I feel like everyone looks different here. So I think that taught me a lot about diversity and inclusion and just being patient with people and being like, okay, there's like, you know, you're one representation of an American that most people are not used to. But you're also possibly like the first person that someone is seeing, like these little kids are seeing, that their families are seeing, who looks really different from them. And so don't be like frustrated or taken aback or irritated at the fact that, you know, they may be a little interested in like your life story and they ask you interesting questions and like where are you from and things like that. Like of course I think I'm used to that too from like growing up in America. It's not like we're perfect here, but I think that helped me translate like patience and understanding. And like I said, like a lot of my job interview questions center around diversity and how have I like showcased diversity. And so I think that's like one really big way that I was able to. But on my resume, I definitely did write about working at the Yonsei Severance Center because it's just something that like, I mean, most people don't really get to work in a hospital in Korea. So yeah, especially in my field, it doesn't really have anything to do with it, but I still got to learn a lot. So.
Yeah, I would say working in volunteering in an international environment, it just gives you a completely different experience than working in the States. Composing a resume is different in the UK than it would be here. One of my really good friends, when I was looking for a job, I was like, do you mind looking over my resume? She's like, sure. And she's just like, you won't get a job with an American resume. Because UK resumes are incredibly compact. Their cover letters usually involve like bullet points so that they get straight to the point. So it's very different from what we're used to here, but I was able to use those skills of really condensing my resume to really, really highlight my skills that I developed not only my time there, but just like over my professional career for my current resume. And definitely working in international environments, it really makes you just your interpersonal skills go up significantly. Your ability to be able to just converse with people and actively listen and make sure that you're just giving them the attention that they deserve, it goes up a lot when you're in really, really international environments. But also just shows that you're willing to work with people outside of, you know, your department. Even just like interdepartmental skills is also a big thing that you gain when you're working in very different environments.
Yeah. For me, I volunteered at the my school as a language exchange student, and also I interned at a NGO. So working at the NGO, like you have to like basically like the basics, like eat on time, learn how to talk with other people, and especially in Japan, like what I found was that we all like the stories were true, like we all had to leave at the same time or wait for the boss to get ready to leave to actually get off work. And since I was the only non-Japanese person working at this internship, I had to just adapt and adapt to the environment. Like when I walked in, I would like bow my head every time I walked in to greet everybody else. And it was difficult at first to put yourself out there because you're not with people you're normally talking to, but eventually you get used to it and you get to get more comfortable and be more active in participating in group discussions. And also as like the language exchange volunteer, which is something that I highly recommend anyone to do, is that you get to talk, like I got to teach other people English and practice English with them, but at the same time, they taught me Japanese and practiced Japanese with me. And through that, we developed bonds that we used to go out more often to eat or to go hiking or to just go out at night and make new friends and just develop those interpersonal skills that I talked about earlier. I think those like are super helpful. They were super helpful for me for finding another internship when I came back in the US too.
That's fantastic. There's a lot of stuff to work with there. What skills have you found yourself using from education abroad that you didn't even realize were going to be relevant to where you're currently at right now? So like, you know, you're like, oh wow, any reflections on that, and what didn't even use it in the application process, but now you're like, oh wow, that has come in really handy in this specific situation.
Personally, I think it's just an open-mindedness to try new things and new methods of doing things. Because I think we all get stuck in ruts. We think that, you know, maybe making, like for example, for work, this type of Excel sheet, I know how to make an Excel sheet. My way is the best way. But one of my coworkers was like, let me show you something. And I was like, you know what? That's a better way of doing it. Let me use that way from now on for this kind of Excel sheet. But just being open-minded and willing to try new things, whether that be trying a new food for the first time, going out with a new friend for the first time, it becomes easier. And I know it's hard for us sometimes to try new things, especially in a completely different country, surrounded by completely different people than we're used to. But it really does make an impact on your mindset and just your willingness to participate and do things differently.
Yeah, I think like Kate said, I think just having an open mind is something that sometimes you just have to like force yourself to do. Sometimes you have to tell yourself like, I'm going to have an open mind. I'm going to be the first person to reach out and hang out with these like dorm mates that I have or whatever. Like, and sometimes it's harder because you don't know them, but sometimes it's easier too because, you know, they don't know you and you can be whoever it is that you want to be. And I think that was something that I really tried in Korea. I was like, okay, I'm going to be this like Korea Zara. I'm going to be this person that I have never really tried on before. And I'm going to try and see like how she is and what parts of her I like and what parts of her I don't like. And it was really hard. I think there was a lot that I discovered. You know, I tried to be very like friendly and everyone called me a social butterfly in my dorm building, and that was weird because I don't think that I'm a social butterfly, but I had to really like push myself to be extroverted, and it was really hard at times because that's not my natural personality, but it was like an experiment for myself, you know, like a real life experiment where I was putting myself into this totally different world with people who don't know me, and I decided I can be whoever I want to be, and that's who I decided to be. So it was definitely hard, but it was also really beneficial. And another thing that I didn't really realize, but I've become kind of like a liaison of Korea to my family and friends, people who don't know anything about Korea. Like they always ask me like, what's going on in Korea? Are you studying about Korea right now? Or like, what did you do in Korea or whatever? And it's like, oh, like I tried this new Korean thing. Like I wanted to tell you, Zara. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool because, you know, in the beginning I was like, okay, just because I like studied abroad in Korea for like 16 weeks doesn't mean that I'm like an expert and doesn't mean that I am now like the person who you can like come to. But at the same time, I was like, okay, you know, this is a part of diversity and inclusion. You know, I was an American person for these Koreans when I was in Korea, and now I am like a quasi Korean for people at home. And it's interesting because I'm Asian. So, you would think that people from Asia have like more knowledge about other countries in Asia, but in India and Pakistan, where I'm from, there are very different misconceptions about East Asia, a lot of different stereotypes, a lot of different ideas. And I think I've been able to dispel some of those just by like talking about it and just by saying like, oh, this is like, this food is not Korean, this food is Chinese, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I didn't even know this. And it's a really weird thing that I totally did not anticipate. But I mean, I'm glad. I mean, it's a little annoying sometimes, but it's also cool. Like I'm glad that I can open people's minds up a little bit.
I want to build up on Zara's point about this being a completely new experience, because when I moved into the dorm, like everyone was in the same boat and everything. They're all new and they're all in a new environment, a new country. So it was honestly a reset on what you could do, on like what you regretted not doing during your freshman dorm experience. And because of that, that led me to be more open-minded, more willing to do stuff. So when I was in at UCR before I studied abroad, I usually was more conservative with my time going out and with hanging out with friends, because I thought I like studied instead of doing that. But during Japan, if somebody invited me to do something, I would always just say yes. Like even if I had a quiz or assignment due the next day, I would just say yes and figure out some other time to do it. So it was more of a, like I wasn't expecting for my time management skills like over there to improve drastically, because before I thought that it was already good enough, and my openness and willingness to just experience new things and go out more, meet new people, and just build your relationships, that made me more able to develop all these different skills, and all these different skills are able to work together to make you into like a better person, or even just like this piano's suggestion, like to develop your career readiness skills, and to your interpersonal skills, and also your intrapersonal skills as well.
I love that. That's wonderful. Okay, well, we'll do one more question. Overall, what do you believe the biggest takeaway from your experience studying abroad has been? It's always like not an easy question, but.
For me, it's such a cliche, but it broadens your perspective. It gives you an idea of not only like Zara and Harrison have said, it allows you kind of to expand as a person. It gives you a perspective of like, is this something that Kate in the US would have done, or is this something that Kate in Scotland would have done? And I think for me, it definitely has made me a bolder person, which I certainly appreciate in daily life. But I just think it really makes you a critical self-evaluator. It makes you an evaluator also on international affairs. Like I take a very interesting look at a lot of things that are happening in the US, because I have an eye of what other countries say about us, especially politically. I think it really does help you grow. And again, it's such a cliche, but it really, really does. I think I'm a much better communicator than I was. You maintain just the most fantastic friendships. I talk daily with a lot of my buds in the UK, and they're like, once lockdown's done, you better be coming over here. We need to go on a pub crawl. And I'm like, I will be on the first plane out of there. Trust me. But the friendships are truly, truly spectacular. And it just makes you, I think, just overall a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, definitely. I still talk to my friends from Japan too, and like basically the same thing as Kate. Like once this pandemic's over, we're going to go on a Europe tour and visit all the churches and all the pubs too. So that's definitely something I'm looking forward to within the next year or two. But also like something that that like really like changed that changed me during education abroad is that it just like made me like like it is a cliche, but it changed me like it changed my entire like my life basically, because it made me like know what I want to do when I start working like full time. It made me like just develop as a person, and it provided me all these different career readiness skills for the future. And also for the thing that got me was that for like all the my friends that came from like other English speaking places, there were still a lot of different like words and terminology that we use and different culture that we had. That was like the most surprising thing to me, because I didn't expect like any trouble like talking to them. Like when I went in there, I was only expecting to have trouble maybe communicating with the native students or like students from other countries that didn't speak English, but like practically all of Western Europe was able to talk to me with no problem. And they still had their own quirks and niches, but it made me like realize that you have to be adaptable and flexible when meeting people from like not just from whatever country you're going to, but also people who are coming in to study abroad with you and live with you in the same dorms and like go out with you whenever you want. So that's something that was like my biggest takeaway from here. Like everybody's in the same boat and wanting to do the same thing. So you should just be open-minded and willing to do anything basically, because living abroad and studying abroad in a different country is completely different from just traveling abroad. Because I've been to Japan before, and my experience traveling there as a tourist versus living there as a student was completely different. And I would take being a student anytime over being a tourist again.
Yeah, I think I wish I could never stop being a student. I wish I could always just be a student and like go travel to many different countries and live there. And just as a student though, I feel like life as a student is just so much better right now. Like in post-graduation, it's like so weird. I hate not being a student. This is the first time in my life that I'm not, and I really hate it. But I think my biggest takeaway was that public transportation is amazing and that we really need to work on it in America. And I hate that we don't have it here. And because I went from living in Seoul to living in LA for the summer, and it was terrible. So I was very upset with that. And then B, I think everyone should study abroad. And this is definitely very cliche. And I think this is something that education abroad is always saying, that like you have to study abroad. Make sure you study abroad. You're going to regret it if you don't. And it's not like I didn't believe them. I think I did, but I just didn't really like care that much until I went abroad. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a totally different person now. And I'm so much better. I'm like such a better Zara. So I think everyone should have the opportunity to study abroad, even if you just go to Canada, even if you're like, Canada is like right there and it's like the exact same as America. It's like, it's not going to be. So just do it. Even if it's really, something you feel like it's difficult to manage while you're juggling school and everything, it's possible. So definitely do it.
Thank you. I think I want to highlight how it may feel like you're a better version of you, but it's not necessarily that. It's more just like you know yourself better, right? You understand yourself better, and you're like, wow, like going through those different experiences with you, it's not that you are a better version of you. It's that you understand yourself better, and you are like able to be more fully who you are, which is really amazing. So I want to thank Kate, Harrison, and Zara so much. And we are going to move into Q&A now. And let me go ahead and pause.